Death had never needed to announce itself to Era. It did not come with screams or blood or the clash of steel. It came quietly. As numbers, they hovered above every head she had ever seen. Softly glowing runes formed of pale silver light. Some counted down slowly, lazily, as if time itself were reluctant to move. Others burned bright and fast, ticking away with terrifying urgency. Years, months, days, hours, minutes. Ara learned to read them before she learned to write her name. By the time she understood what the numbers meant, it was already too late to forget. The first time she truly knew, the first time the weight of her curse settled into her bones, she was 12 years old. Her mother stood at the hearth, humming an old pack song as she stirred a pot of stew. The scent of herbs and roasted roots filled their small cabin, warm and safe and ordinary. Sunlight streamed through the window, dust motes dancing in the air like tiny spirits. Above her mother's head glowed 7 days. Era stared at those numbers until her vision blurred, until her eyes burned with unshed tears. She said nothing. What could she say? Who would believe a 12-year-old claiming to see death? She watched her mother laugh that evening, watched her braid Era's hair with gentle fingers, watched her kiss her forehead before bed. Sleep well, little moon, her mother whispered, using the nickname she'd given Era when she was born under a full moon's light. 7 days later, fever claimed her. 7 days exactly. The numbers never lied. And when the pack learned that Era had watched her mother's death approach without warning anyone, they decided Era had always been the problem, the curse, the omen, the deathbringer. They were right, in a way, but not in the way they thought. Before we begin, if you love dark Lycan Kings, forbidden mates, and stories that make your heart ache, like this video, subscribe, and step into the pack, because these stories only get deeper from here. Sound of wind through trees. Distant bird calls. For 11 years after her mother's death, Era lived where the world forgot her. Her cabin sat at the very edge of the Blackwood forest, far beyond the last path, and farther still from the last home, willing to claim her. Wolves avoided the area instinctively, their pack bonds pulling them away from the strange emptiness that surrounded her dwelling. Travelers felt uneasy passing through, often changing routes without understanding why. Even the wind seemed to hush itself around the place, as if nature itself held its breath. The villagers had many names for her: witch, deathbringer, cursed Omega, demon's daughter, the girl who brings endings. Era did not argue with any of them. Arguments required being close enough to people to have conversations, and conversations meant meeting eyes. And meeting eyes meant seeing their deaths. She had learned long ago that people didn't actually want truth. They wanted comfort. She woke each morning before dawn, when the world was still wrapped in silver mist. She gathered herbs with careful hands: wolfsbane for fever, nightshade carefully measured for pain, moonflower for those who couldn't sleep. She hunted small game when she could, her traps efficient and her aim with a bow surprisingly accurate for someone who rarely practiced. She traded her salves and tinctures for supplies when desperation drove people to her door. And oh, how they came when desperation struck. When their children were dying and the village healer had failed. When infections festered beyond prayer. When hope had run out, and all that remained was a cursed Omega who lived beyond the trees. They only came when they were afraid. They never stayed long. They always paid in coin, never in kindness. They took her medicine and left quickly, often without a word of thanks, making signs against evil as they hurried away. Era kept her hood low when she absolutely had to enter the villages. Eye contact was dangerous. One glance was all it took for the numbers to appear, hovering above someone's head like a death sentence she alone could read. And once she saw them, she carried that knowledge forever, added to the enormous weight she already bore. People asked questions they did not want answered. Will my mate survive the winter? Will my son return from patrol? How long do I have left? My daughter, she's coughing blood, please. Just tell me she'll be all right. Era always told the truth. She had tried lying once, when she was 14. Told a woman her husband would live when Era saw 3 days above his head. The woman had been so happy, so relieved. She'd even smiled at Era, the first smile anyone had given her in years. 3 days later, the man died, and the woman came back. The hatred in her eyes had been worse than any curse, because it was layered with betrayal. Era had given her false hope, and that was crueler than any truth. After that, Era never lied about death again, and they always hated her for it. The marketplace was the worst. Too many people pressed together, too many futures burning above their heads like candles in the dark. Long lives and short ones, peaceful deaths and violent ones. all tangled together in a tapestry only she could see. She learned to navigate by sound and scent, keeping her eyes trained on the cobblestones, worn smooth by thousands of feet. She knew every crack, every uneven stone. She could walk through the market square with her eyes closed if she had to. Cursed thing, someone would mutter as she passed. Bad luck, another would whisper, pulling their children away. My aunt died 2 days after she bought medicine from her, a voice would say. Never quite quiet enough, Era had stopped correcting them years ago. She wasn't bad luck. She was just aware of it. There was a difference, though no one cared to understand it. Sound of footsteps approaching. Heavy door knock. The knock came just as the sun dipped below the tree line, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and deep purple. 3 sharp raps, authoritative, final, the kind of knock that didn't expect to be ignored. Ara froze with her knife half raised over a bundle of roots she'd been preparing for drying. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear of the visitor, but from what she already knew about him. She had heard the footsteps approaching from far off, had felt the shift in the air that came with pack authority, had known, with the certainty of her curse, who stood outside her door. She looked up, and through the thin walls of her cabin, she saw them. The numbers: 6 months, 3 days, less than a season. The soldier at her door would be dead before spring fully bloomed. She opened the door anyway. The soldier stood stiffly on her threshold, his cloak bearing the crest of Thornhaven, a silver wolf wrapped around a black tower. His expression was carefully neutral, trained into blankness through years of service. But fear glimmered behind his eyes like candlelight through a crack in a door. He was afraid of her. They were always afraid. Era of no pack, he said formally, his voice steady despite the fear. By decree of Alpha King Dominic Graythorn, you are summoned to Thornhaven Castle to stand before the throne. Her chest tightened, but her voice remained calm. I refuse. The soldier didn't blink. He'd been prepared for this response. Refusal means death. By law, all individuals with documented gifts are required to answer a direct summons from the Alpha King. Failure to comply is considered an act of treason. Of course it did. Of course they'd made it impossible to say no. Ara looked past him to the forest, the only place that had ever let her exist without judgment. The trees stood silent in the gathering dusk, their branches reaching toward a sky that was quickly darkening. The evening birds had already gone quiet, as if they too understood the weight of this moment. She thought of her mother's grave, unmarked and alone, beneath the old oak tree half a mile from her cabin. She thought of the 11 years she had carved out of solitude and survival, of the fragile peace she'd built from loneliness. She thought of the numbness that had become her only companion, cold but reliable. Then she looked at the soldier again. 6 months, 3 days. Would he die in service? In battle? Would it be quick? Or would he suffer? Would anyone mourn him? She would never know. She would carry his death date like she carried all the others. But she would never know the story of his ending. Then I'll go, she said quietly. The soldier exhaled relief or regret. She couldn't tell. Maybe both. We leave at dawn. Pack light. The journey is 3 days. How long will I be gone? His expression flickered. That is not for me to say, which meant he didn't know. Or more likely, that she wouldn't be coming back. That night, Ara did not sleep. She sat by her small hearth and watched the fire burn low, memorizing everything. The crackle of wood as it burned, the smell of ash and pine, the weight of silence that had been her companion for so long. She packed what little she owned, a change of clothes, her mother's silver pendant, a small pouch of herbs, a water skin, a knife. Everything she had in the world fit into a single worn pack. Before dawn broke, she walked to her mother's grave one last time. She knelt in the damp grass and pressed her palm against the earth. I don't know if I'm coming back, she whispered. But if I don't, I'm sorry I couldn't stay. The wind stirred the leaves above her, and for just a moment, Ara let herself believe it was her mother's response. By the time the soldier arrived, she was ready, or as ready as she would ever be. Sound of horses walking. Forest ambience. The journey took 3 days. Just as the soldier had said, Ara rode in silence behind him, mounted on a sturdy mare that had seen better days. The soldier never offered his name, and Ara never asked for it. What was the point? 6 months, 3 days. He would be a stranger when he died, whether she knew his name or not. They traveled through villages where children played in the streets, where families gathered for evening meals, where life continued in all its ordinary, precious ways. Era watched it all through the detachment her gift had taught her. Above every head, the numbers glowed, some long decades stretching ahead, some short mere months or weeks, all finite, all ending. On the second day, they passed through a town preparing for a wedding. Flowers adorned every doorway, white roses and blue forget-me-nots woven into garlands. Musicians practiced in the square, their melodies cheerful and bright. A young bride laughed as her friends adorned her hair with ribbons, her face radiant with joy. Above her head, 11 days, Era looked away immediately, her stomach churning. 11 days. The girl would marry tomorrow, the decorations made that clear. She would dance and laugh and believe in forever. She would lie beside her new husband and dream of children and growing old together. She would have 9 days of married happiness, and then the numbers would run out, and someone else would grieve. This was Era's curse, not seeing death, but carrying the weight of knowing, while the world remained blissfully unaware. Are you all right? The soldier asked, glancing back. It was the first personal thing he'd said to her in days. I'm fine, Era lied. He didn't believe her, but he didn't press. They rode on in silence. On the third day, just after midday, he spoke again. They say you can see when people will die. Era's hands tightened on the reins. They say many things about me. Is it true? She considered not answering. But what was the harm? He already feared her. Everyone did. Yes, she said simply. He was quiet for a long moment. How long do I have? Don't ask questions you don't want answered, Era replied, her voice gentle but firm. I already know I'm going to die, he said. I'm a soldier. We all know. I want to know if I have time to finish building my daughter's dollhouse. Something in Era's chest cracked. His daughter. Of course he had a daughter. She closed her eyes. 6 months. You have time. She heard him exhale slowly. Thank you. They didn't speak again after that, but something had shifted between them. He wasn't just afraid anymore. He was grateful. Era didn't know which was worse. Late on the third day, as the sun began its descent, the soldier pointed ahead. There, he said. Thornhaven. Era lifted her eyes and her breath caught. Thornhaven rose from the mountains like a warning carved in stone. Sound of massive gates opening. Echo of stone chambers. The castle loomed against the mountains, all black stone and sharp angles. Walls thick enough to withstand siege engines. Towers that pierced the sky like spears. Gates reinforced with iron and etched with runes that still glowed faintly with old magic. It was beautiful in the way a predator was beautiful, dangerous, purposeful, built to dominate. Era felt the weight of it the moment she crossed the threshold. As though time itself bent differently here. The air tasted of power and secrets, of battles fought and won, of kings who did not bow to fate or gods. They passed through 3 sets of gates, each one larger and more imposing than the last. Guards watched from every tower, their eyes tracking her movement. She kept her gaze down, but she felt them anyway, felt their suspicion, their curiosity, their fear. Inside the castle proper, the soldier led her through corridors lit by torches and magic both. Tapestries hung on the walls depicting battles and ceremonies. Servants moved with efficient purpose, carrying trays and messages and bundles of cloth. Finally, they reached the great hall. Inside, dozens of others waited, gifted ones, cursed ones, broken ones, a woman whose shadow moved independently, twisting into shapes that didn't match her body. A man who whispered constantly to bones he carried in a pouch, and the bones whispered back. A boy whose blood shimmered silver when he cut his finger to demonstrate his gift. A girl who wept tears that turned to ice before they hit the ground, leaving a trail of frozen crystals wherever she walked. A person who could taste lies. Another who could see through walls. Someone who made plants grow with a touch. Someone else who could summon small flames without tinder. Above every head, Ira saw it. The numbers. Some stretched long into the future, decades of life still owed to them, years to explore their gifts and find their places. Others burned dangerously short, counting down to ends that would come within the month, the week, the day. One woman had 3 hours above her head. She stood calmly, as if unaware that she would collapse before dinner from an aneurysm. Era could see building in her skull like a storm. Era pressed her fingers into her palms hard enough to hurt, grounding herself. She had not come here to read death. She had come because she had no choice, but death had always been her companion. It followed her everywhere. The hall fell silent so suddenly it felt like a physical thing. Boots echoed across stone, measured, deliberate, carrying a weight that needed no announcement. Each step seemed to resonate in the chest, in the bones. Power rolled through the room like a restrained storm, pressing against skin, settling in lungs, making breath come just a little harder. The Alpha King, someone whispered reverently. Era lifted her head. Dominic Graythorne sat upon a throne carved from a single piece of ancient stone, worn smooth by generations of rulers. His presence commanded without effort, not through intimidation, but through absolute certainty. He wore battle-scarred armor that told stories in every dent and scratch. His gaze was sharp, controlled, unreadable. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples. Hands that had held swords and signed treaties with equal certainty. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. Old and pale, he was beautiful in the way a cliff face was. Beautiful, magnificent, and dangerous, and ancient, slowly, instinctively unable to stop herself. Era looked above his head and felt her world crack open. There were no numbers, no runes, no countdown, no end, nothing, just empty air where death should have been written. Her breath caught painfully in her chest, her gift stuttering like a candle in the wind. Her heart hammered, her vision swam, for the first time in her entire life, since the day she'd first seen the glowing numbers at age 3. Era was staring at a person whose death she could not see. Dominic's eyes locked onto hers across the vast hall, dark, intense, searching, and in that instant, something ancient stirred between them, a recognition that transcended words, a pull that defied explanation, a connection that shouldn't have been possible. Fear curled in Era's gut like a living thing, because everyone died. Everyone, every person, every animal, every living thing, they all had endings. That was the fundamental truth of existence, the unbreakable law she'd spent her entire life witnessing. So why hadn't death marked him? Step forward, the Alpha King said. His voice carried effortlessly through the hall, resonant and commanding without being loud. It was the kind of voice that expected obedience and got it. Era obeyed, her legs moving before her mind could protest. She walked down the center aisle, aware of every eye upon her, every whisper that followed in her wake. That's the Deathbringer. I heard she cursed her own mother. They say she can kill with a look. Why did he summon her? When she stood before the throne, close enough to see the silver threading through his dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him, Dominic leaned forward slightly. What do you see? He asked. It wasn't curiosity. It was a test. Era swallowed. Her throat felt like sand, her mouth dry. Everyone here has an ending, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Except you. A murmur rippled through the hall like wind through wheat. Shock, disbelief, fear, excitement. Dominic's expression did not change. Not a flicker of surprise or concern crossed his face. Show me, he said. It was a command, not a request. A guard was brought forward, a young man with kind eyes and a nervous smile. He bowed deeply to his king, then glanced at Era with more curiosity than fear. That was unusual. Most people feared her on sight. My lady, he said politely. Era looked at him, really looked. Let her gift fully focus. Above his head, 6 hours, 12 minutes. The numbers burned bright and clear and terribly, terribly short. Era closed her eyes, bile rising in her throat. She fought it down. 6 hours, she whispered. Collapsed lung, internal bleeding. You'll feel fine until you don't. Then you'll collapse during afternoon training. The pain will be sharp, on your right side. The healers will try, but she couldn't finish. The guard laughed nervously. I feel perfect, my lady. Surely you're mistaken? I'm never mistaken, Era said quietly. Dominic dismissed the guard with a wave, but Era noticed him gesture subtly to a nearby healer. Instructions given wordlessly. Watch him. Be ready. The hall waited in tense silence. Time crawled forward with agonizing slowness. 6 hours later, exactly as Era had predicted, the guard collapsed during sword practice. A blunted training spear had cracked his rib during a routine drill, the bone splintering inward to pierce his lung. He died before the sun set, drowning in his own blood, despite the healer's desperate efforts. When word reached the Great Hall, delivered by a pale-faced servant, no one laughed at Era anymore. No one whispered that she was a fraud. Instead, they looked at her with something worse than fear. They looked at her like she was death itself. Sound of footsteps in empty corridors, distant torch crackling. That night, Era was summoned alone to the Alpha King's chambers. The message came via a servant who wouldn't meet her eyes. The king requests your presence. Immediately, Era's stomach twisted. Requests from kings were never truly requests. She followed the servant through corridors that grew quieter and more isolated with each turn. Fewer guards, fewer servants, until finally, they stood before massive oak doors carved with scenes of ancient battles. The servant knocked twice and fled. Enter, came Dominic's voice from within. Air pushed open the doors and stepped into a space that stole her breath. The chamber was larger than her entire cabin had been stone, walls lined with weapons and books in equal measure. A massive hearth crackled with fire, throwing dancing shadows across tapestries that depicted the history of Thornhaven. Windows overlooked the mountains, the moon hanging full and bright against the star-scattered sky, and in the center of it all stood Dominic Graythorne. He had removed his armor. He wore only dark trousers and an unlaced shirt that hung open, revealing his chest. Era's breath caught not from attraction, though he was undeniably beautiful, but from what she saw carved into his flesh: scars, ritual markings, ancient symbols etched deep into muscle and bone, forming patterns that pulsed faintly with residual magic. They glowed softly in the firelight, silver and blue and something darker, something that looked like absence rather than color. The doors closed behind her with heavy finality. You see them, Dominic said quietly, not turning from the window. Yes, Ara answered, unable to look away from the scars. I see everything. He turned then, slowly, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Moonlight caught on the ritual marks, making them shimmer like liquid metal. 3 years ago, he said, his voice carrying the weight of memory. A demonic gate tore open in the northern mountains. Era's breath caught. She had heard whispers of it, travelers' tales told in hushed voices. Stories of darkness that consumed entire villages, of creatures that fed on fear and flesh, of magic that turned the sky black for weeks. Most people thought it was exaggeration. Legend built on tragedy. Looking at Dominic's scars, Ara knew it had been real. No army could hold it, Dominic continued, moving closer. No magic could close it. We tried everything. Battle mages, blood wards, holy relics. Nothing worked. The gate just kept growing. And the things that came through. He stopped, jaw tightening. In 1 month, we lost 3,000 soldiers, he said quietly. Entire villages were consumed. Children disappeared in the night. The darkness was spreading, and we had no way to stop it. Ara found her voice. So you made a bargain? Yes. With what? Dominic's eyes met hers, dark and infinite and haunted. With time itself. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell leather and pine, and something indefinably him. Close enough that she could see the fine silver threading through his dark irises, like cracks in stone. An ancient entity appeared to me, he said, old as creation. It offered a trade: seal the gate permanently, save the world from demonic invasion. All I had to do was give up something in return. Your future, Era whispered. Every future the universe had planned for me, Dominic confirmed. Every ending, every possibility, every moment I might have lived beyond that day. My death, my aging, my fate, everything that made me part of the natural flow of time. I surrendered it all. Era's chest ached with the enormity of it. The ritual took 3 days, he continued, gesturing to the scars. They had to carve these marks into my flesh while I was conscious. Had to sever every thread of destiny that connected me to the world. By the end, he trailed off, staring at his hands as if they belonged to a stranger. By the end, he said softly, I wasn't part of time anymore. I existed outside it, eternal, unchanging, alone. In return, Dominic said, the gate was sealed. The demons were banished. Thousands lived, silence pressed in around them, broken only by the crackling fire. That is why I am unreadable to you, he said, meeting her eyes. I have no death to see, no fate to read. I simply am, forever present, never past, never future. Era's gift had never failed her. Not once in 23 years, until him. And you've carried this alone, she said softly. For 3 years, something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps that she understood. That she saw past the sacrifice to the cost. Everyone celebrates what I did, Dominic said. They call me savior, hero, the king who gave everything for his people. They build statues and sing songs and tell stories about my noble sacrifice. He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. But they don't understand what it means to exist outside time, he continued. To watch the world move forward while you stand still. To feel emotions that have no anchor, no context, no meaning, because you have no future to work toward. You feel empty, Era said. Worse, Dominic replied. I feel everything and nothing at once. Every moment is simultaneously eternal and meaningless. I could stand here for 1,000 years and it would feel like a day, or a second, or forever. He moved to the window, bracing his hands against the stone. Do you know what it's like? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. To know you'll never die? That you'll watch everyone you've ever known grow old and fade while you remain unchanged? That there's no end, no rest, no release ever? Era stepped closer. It sounds like a different kind of curse. Dominic turned to her, and for the first time, she saw the exhaustion beneath his strength, the loneliness carved into the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself, like a man who had forgotten how to hope. They made me into a tool, he said, an eternal guardian, unchanging, unbreakable, forever present to protect them. And I agreed because the alternative was watching the world burn. But you didn't know the cost, Ara said quietly. I knew, Dominic replied. I just didn't understand it. Not really. Not until the ritual was complete and I woke up and realized that I would spend eternity experiencing this exact isolation, this exact emptiness, and never ever escape it. Ara's throat tightened. She understood isolation. She understood the weight of being different, being cursed, being alone. But at least she would die someday. Dominic never would. You're the first person who's seen me, Dominic said suddenly. Really? Seen me? Not what I represent or what I sacrificed, but the fact that I'm hollow, outside, gone. I see you, Era confirmed softly, and that terrifies me more than any demon, he admitted. Over the following days, Dominic summoned Era repeatedly. Never to the throne room, always to private spaces. His study, the training grounds at dawn, the library late at night. A tea first. She thought he was testing her gift, having her read servants, guards, advisors, proving to himself that her ability was real. But slowly, she realized he wasn't testing her. He was talking to her. You've lived alone for 11 years, he said one afternoon in his study. Afternoon light streaming through tall windows. Why? Ira looked up from the book she'd been examining, a history of the Northern Territories. Because knowing when people die makes them hate you. Dominic leaned against his desk, arms crossed. Does it make you hate them? She shook her head. No, it makes me mourn them early. Every conversation becomes a countdown. Every smile becomes precious, because I know exactly how many they have left. You carry their deaths with you, he said. All of them, Era confirmed. Every person I've ever seen. Their numbers stay with me. I remember them all. That's unbearable, Dominic said quietly. So is existing outside time, Era replied. Something passed between them, understanding, recognition. Two people carrying impossible weights no one else could comprehend. You still feel, Era said suddenly, studying his face. That's what's wrong, isn't it? Dominic stilled. Explain. Someone outside of fate should be distant, detached, like watching the world through glass, Era said, thinking it through as she spoke. But you're not. You feel everything intensely, too intensely, like someone running out of time, rather than someone with all of eternity. His jaw tightened. Yes. Why? Because the ritual severed my connection to fate, Dominic said. But it didn't remove my emotions. It didn't make me inhuman. So I exist in this horrible contradiction, feeling everything a mortal feels, but without the context that makes those feelings meaningful. He pushed away from the desk, pacing. Joy means nothing without the possibility of loss, he said. Fear means nothing without death. Love means nothing without endings. But I feel all of it anyway, these massive, overwhelming emotions that have nowhere to go, nothing to anchor them. You're drowning, Era whispered. Every day, Dominic admitted. And no one knows. How could I tell them? They see a king who sacrificed his future. If they knew I was suffering, that the sacrifice is torment rather than noble peace, it would destroy everything they believe about what I did. Era stood, moving closer. That's why you summoned me. You needed someone who could see that you're not at peace. Someone who wouldn't lie to you about it. I needed someone who understood impossible burdens, Dominic said. Meeting her eyes, the air between them felt charged, heavy with understanding, and something else, something neither of them wanted to name. I understand, Ara said softly. More than you know. Sound of footsteps, distant conversation. Not everyone in Thornhaven feared Era. Some watched her with different intentions. Aldous Merrick, the Alpha King's chief counselor, lingered at the edges of every gathering where Era appeared. He was a tall man, elegant in the way serpents were elegant, all smooth movement and hidden danger. Silver threaded through his dark hair, giving him an air of distinguished wisdom. He wore rich robes embroidered with symbols of office, and his smile was practiced to perfection. He never approached her directly. Instead, he watched from balconies, from shadowed doorways, from across crowded rooms. His gaze followed her like a physical touch. Ara felt it constantly. The weight of his attention. One evening, as she crossed the library, searching for a text on ancient healing practices, she felt him before she saw him. Remarkable, Aldous said, his voice smooth as silk. Ara turned. He stood between two towering bookshelves, seeming to materialize from the shadows themselves. Counselor Merrick, she said politely, keeping her distance. Please, call me Aldous, he said, moving closer with measured steps. We're both in service to the king after all. No need for such formality. Ara said nothing, watching him warily. You've made quite an impression, Aldous continued. The entire court is abuzz with tales of your gift. Some call you Oracle. Others whisper darker names. I'm used to it, Ara said shortly. I'm sure you are. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Tell me, does it ever trouble you? Carrying the weight of so many debts? Every day, and yet you continue, he observed. You don't refuse to look. You don't close your eyes to their fates. Why is that? Ara frowned. What else would I do? But that's the question, isn't it? Aldous said, circling her slowly, like a predator assessing prey. Power unused is power wasted. You could do so much more than simply observe. I'm not interested in power, Ara said firmly. Everyone is interested in power, Aldous countered. They just call it by different names. Control, safety, freedom. But it all comes down to the same thing, the ability to shape the world according to your will. Something about his tone made Ara's skin crawl. Almost without thinking, she met his eyes directly. The runes above his head made her recoil. They flickered wildly, changing, shifting, breaking apart and reforming. Not counting down steadily like normal death dates, but spiraling, fragmenting, becoming something else entirely. Counterfeit, false fate, corrupted time. Ara broke eye contact immediately, her heart hammering. Aldous's smile widened, and she realized with creeping horror that he'd noticed her reaction. Fascinating, isn't it? He murmured, stepping a Vencontinugen 20 for closer. What you see when you look at me. I don't know what you mean, Ara said, backing away. Of course you don't, Aldous replied pleasantly. But let me offer you some advice, little Omega. Some truths were never meant to be seen, and those who see them rarely survive long enough to share what they've learned. Ara's back hit a bookshelf. Are you threatening me? Threatening? Aldous laughed softly. My dear girl, I'm trying to protect you. The king has drawn you close, made you important. That makes you vulnerable. People will use you, manipulate you, possibly even hurt you to get to him. Why would anyone want to hurt the king? Aldous's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Because power attracts opposition, always, and a king who exists outside fate is complicated. Some might say problematic. He saved the world, Ara said. Did he? Aldous tilted his head. Or did he simply delay the inevitable? Gates can be sealed, but they can also be reopened. Demons can be banished, but they don't forget. And a king who cannot die, who cannot change, who cannot grow well, that presents certain challenges. Ara pushed away from the bookshelf, moving toward the exit. I should go, of course, Aldous said, making no move to stop her. But Ara, be careful. You already see too much. Don't make the mistake of trying to understand it all. Why not? She challenged, pausing at the door. His smile was cold. Because understanding leads to questions. Questions lead to answers. And some answers will destroy you. Ara left without responding. But his words followed her like shadows. That night, she told Dominic about the encounter. They were in his chambers again. It had become their habit. These late-night conversations where pretense fell away and truth could breathe. Aldous has always been calculating, Dominic said carefully when she finished. He's served the throne for 20 years. He's brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and completely loyal. Are you certain about that last part? Ara asked. Dominic's expression hardened. What did you see? When you looked at him? Ara hesitated. His numbers were wrong, broken, like someone had shattered fate itself and tried to piece it back together. Dominic was very still. Like mine? No, Ara said immediately. Yours is absence, clean, deliberate. His is corruption, fracture, like he's trying to exist outside fate, but failing or forcing it somehow. That shouldn't be possible, Dominic said. The ritual that removed me from time, it was unique, ancient. The entity I bargained with was older than recorded history. No one else should have that knowledge, unless someone found another way, Ara suggested quietly. Dominic stood, pacing to the window. The moonlight caught his profile, sharp and troubled. I'll have him watched, he said finally, carefully. If Aldous is involved in something, he didn't finish the thought. They both knew that betrayal from within was often more dangerous than any external threat. Sound of alarm bells. Distant shouting. The attack came 3 days later. At dusk, Era was in the garden, helping one of the healers gather nightshade. When the first alarm bell rang, deep, resonant, terrifying in its urgency, she looked up instinctively, her gift flaring to life. Numbers exploded across her vision like stars, dozens, hundreds, all burning far too bright. Guards on the walls, 12 minutes, 30 for minutes, 2 hours, servants fleeing inside, 6 years, 15 years, decades yet unlived, soldiers running toward the gates, 18 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, and scattered throughout blank spaces, voids where living things moved, but had no numbers at all, shadow creatures, everyone inside. Someone shouted, shadow attack, full defensive positions. Era ran toward the castle, her heart hammering. Shadow creatures were supposed to be gone, banished when Dominic sealed the gate. Their return meant something had gone terribly wrong. She burst into the main courtyard just as Dominic emerged from the war room. Already armored, power rolling off him in waves, their eyes met across the chaos. Dominic, she screamed. The eastern wall, it's going to collapse. Get everyone away from it. He didn't question, didn't hesitate. Clear the eastern wall. Fall back to secondary positions. Now. Soldiers scrambled to obey. 15 seconds later, a massive shadow beast slammed into the eastern wall with enough force to crack stone. The wall shuddered, but held barely because everyone had already moved. 3 soldiers who would have died were still alive. Dominic's gaze found hers again, and she saw calculation behind the intensity. He was realizing what she could do in battle, how valuable her gift truly was. Stay close to me, he ordered, grabbing her arm. You warn, I protect. Understood? Ara nodded. You have no wolf, he said, his grip tightening. If something gets past me, I run, Ara finished. I know. The battle erupted in full chaos. Shadow creatures poured through breaches in the outer walls, amorphous forms of living darkness. Some vaguely wolf-shaped, others twisted into nightmare configurations. They moved against the wind, flowing like smoke, given malicious intent. Screaming without mouths, Dominic's power was terrifying to behold. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, not fully shifting, but channeling enough to make him faster, stronger, more dangerous. He moved through the battlefield like death itself, every strike precise and lethal, and Era stood behind him, shouting warnings until her throat burned. Behind you. Left side incoming. Marcus. Move right, now. The captain shield up in 3 seconds. She watched futures flicker and change with every decision, every movement. Soldiers who would have died lived because they listened to her warnings. Others fell anyway, their numbers running out. Despite her best efforts, death didn't always listen to pleading. No matter how desperately she tried, a young soldier named Thomas fought bravely, his sword flashing in the fading light. Above his head, 43 years, then a shadow creature caught him from behind. The numbers plummeted to minutes. Thomas. Era screamed. Behind you. He turned, but too slow. Claws raked across his chest. Deep. Fatal. Era watched the numbers above his head spiral down to 0 as he collapsed. Blood pooling beneath him. Dominic killed the creature instantly. But it was too late. Thomas was already dead. The battle raged for hours, but it felt like days. Era's voice was raw, her gift burning like fire behind her eyes from constant use. She had never used it so intensively for so long, tracking dozens of people simultaneously, watching their futures shift and change with dizzying speed. She saved 17 soldiers directly. She watched 9 die anyway. As dusk gave way to full dark, the shadow creatures began to retreat, fading back into whatever darkness had spawned them. The fighting slowed, then stopped. Silence fell gradually, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the prayers of healers. Era stood in the courtyard, swaying with exhaustion, her hands shaking. That's when she saw him, a young soldier, barely 18, standing near the fountain. Above his head, the numbers were dropping rapidly. Hours becoming minutes, becoming seconds, internal bleeding, organ damage from blunt force trauma. He'd been thrown against a wall during the fighting and didn't realize he was dying. Hey, Era called, stumbling toward him. You need to get to a healer, now. He laughed, wiping blood from a minor cut on his arm. I'm fine, my lady. Just bruised. No, Era insisted, grabbing his arm. Your movement in her peripheral vision, a shadow creature smaller than the others, but fast lunged from beneath a collapsed market stall where it had been hiding, straight toward the soldier. Era didn't think. She shoved him aside with all her strength, throwing him clear. The shadow creature's claws caught her, instead raking across her ribs, pain exploding white-hot through her entire body. Era hit the ground hard, her vision swimming. The creature loomed over her, ready to strike again, and for the first time in years, for the first time since she was 12 and watching her mother's final days count down, Era saw her own death. Numbers appeared in her vision, reflected somehow in the creature's form. For seconds, 3, her life, ending before it had really begun. 2, a roar shook the earth itself. A massive wolf larger than anything Era had ever seen slammed into the shadow creature with enough force to crack the stone beneath them. Dominic, his transformation was complete, magnificent, terrifying. Silver-black fur rippled with contained lightning, eyes burned like stars. Power rolled off him in crushing waves that made even the shadows recoil. He was enormous, easily 8 feet at the shoulder, ancient and primal and absolutely lethal. He tore into the shadow creature with savage precision, reducing it to wisps of darkness that dissipated like smoke and wind. Then he shifted back, the transformation violent and quick, dropping to his knees beside Era. His hands hovered over her torn ribs, shaking. Era, look at me. She forced her eyes open. The pain was massive, crushing, making it hard to breathe. Healer, Dominic roared. Now. But Era grabbed his hand, holding on with what little strength remained. The soldier, she gasped. Is he alive? Dominic said roughly. Because of you. Now stop talking and save your strength. Healers rushed forward, magic flaring, but Dominic didn't move. He stayed kneeling beside her, one hand wrapped around hers, his face carved with something between fury and terror. If you die, he said, his voice breaking, time will finally take me too. Era stared at him through the haze of pain. What? I'm bound to you, he said, and there was wonder and horror in his voice. Somehow the moment you saw me, when you acknowledged my existence when no one else could truly see me, something changed. I don't understand, Era whispered. Neither do I, Dominic admitted. But I feel it. You're my anchor, the only thing tethering me to this world. If you die, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. The healers worked quickly, their magic, knitting flesh and bone. The pain slowly receded to a dull throb. Era would live, but something fundamental had changed. Between her and the Alpha King, something neither of them fully understood. Something that terrified them both. Sound of fireplace crackling. Quiet night. Ambience. Era woke 3 days later in the finest guest chamber Thornhaven had to offer. Silk sheets. A fireplace large enough to stand in. Windows overlooking the mountains. Servants who brought meals and changed bandages with quiet efficiency. She had never experienced luxury before. It felt wrong somehow, like she was wearing someone else's skin. Dominic visited every day, sometimes multiple times. At first, he claimed it was to check on her recovery, but they both knew better. He needed to see her alive, needed visual confirmation that his anchor to the world still existed. You shouldn't have saved that soldier, he said one afternoon. Sitting in the chair beside her bed, he would have died, Era replied. So could you have, but I didn't. Dominic's jaw tightened. You have no wolf, no enhanced healing. You're fragile compared to, say it, Era interrupted. Compared to what? To you? To the man who can't die. He fell silent. I may be fragile, Era continued softly, but I'm not helpless. And I won't apologize for saving lives when I can. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Respect. Perhaps, or recognition. You're impossible, he muttered. So are you, Era replied, smiling slightly. The dynamic between them had changed since the battle. The careful distance they'd maintained, the formality of king and gifted servant, had crumbled completely. Now they spoke as equals. as two cursed souls who understood each other in ways no one else could. What did you mean? Era asked during one of his evening visits. When you said you were bound to me. Dominic was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. When I removed myself from time, he finally said, I became untethered from everything. No past to anchor me. No future to pull me forward. Just an endless, meaningless present. He turned to face her. But when you looked at me and saw nothing, when you acknowledged that I existed outside fate, something shifted. For the first time in 3 years, I felt tethered, connected, real. I don't understand, Ara said. Neither do I, fully, Dominic admitted. But I think I believe that you became my anchor. The one person who could truly see what I'd become. And in seeing it, in acknowledging it, you gave me a reference point. A reason to exist. Ara's chest tightened. That's too much weight for one person to carry. You already carry the weight of everyone's death, Dominic pointed out. What's one more impossible burden? Despite everything, Ara laughed. Fair point. If you die, Dominic said seriously, I lose my only connection to this world. I'll become truly untethered, completely alone in a way that he stopped, shaking his head. I don't know what happens then, he admitted, but I suspect it won't be pleasant. Then we keep each other alive, Ara said simply. How can you say that so easily? Dominic asked. Because I've been alone for 11 years, Ara replied. I've carried my curse alone, lived alone, existed alone. And now for the first time I'm not. Someone sees me. Someone understands. Why would I risk losing that? Dominic reached for her hand, holding it gently. You're dangerous, he said softly. You keep saying that, Ara replied, because it keeps being true. Aldous Merrick watched from the shadows of the upper gallery, his expression placid, but his thoughts churning. She's recovering, growing stronger, growing closer to him. This was problematic. Dominic had been the perfect tool for 3 years, powerful, unchanging, eternally present to maintain the status quo. Aldous had worked carefully, slowly positioning pieces for his ultimate goal. But if Dominic started caring about someone again, if he found an anchor, a reason to feel connected to the world, everything could unravel. The Omega had to be removed. But carefully, subtly, Aldous descended from the gallery and made his way through quiet corridors toward the ritual chamber. Few people came here. The room carried too many dark memories, too much residual magic from the ceremony that had severed. Dominic from Fate.it was perfect for his purposes. He entered the chamber and locked the door behind him. The ancient runes on the floor were dormant now, just carved stone. But Aldous knew the truth. They could be activated again, modified, used for different purposes. He had spent 3 years studying the ritual that had removed Dominic from time, learning its mechanics, understanding its power, and discovering that it could be reversed, or more accurately transferred. Aldous knelt before the altar, running his fingers over symbols that predated written language. He had already performed his own version of the ritual, giving up his fate in exchange for power, but it was imperfect, unstable. His connection to time was corrupted rather than severed cleanly. He needed to complete what he'd started, and to do that, he needed Dominic's power. Soon, Aldous whispered to the empty chamber. Very soon. Sound of wind picking up. Distant thunder. Era was well enough to walk the ramparts a week after the attack. She stood beside Dominic in the pre-dawn darkness, watching the sky shift from black to deep blue to gold. Do you ever wish you hadn't done it? She asked quietly. Given up your future? Dominic leaned against the stone wall. Every day, even knowing it saved thousands? Yes, she waited, letting him gather his thoughts. Because I didn't just give up my death, Dominic said. I gave up the possibility of change, of growth, of becoming someone different than who I am right now, frozen in this moment forever. But you're not frozen, Era observed. You feel, you adapt, you care about what happens next. That's the paradox, Dominic replied. I exist outside time, but my emotions don't, so I feel everything: hope, fear, joy, grief, but they have no anchor, no context. They just float in this eternal present with nowhere to go. Ara moved closer. I don't see your death, but I do see something else. What? Possibility, she said. You're not static. Every choice you make, every person you connect with, it changes you. Maybe not physically, maybe not in ways fate can measure, but you change. Dominic studied her face. You're the first person who's seen that, because I'm the first person who could see you at all, Era replied. He smiled, a real smile, soft and genuine. That's when the second attack hit. And no warning. No alarms. No time to prepare. Shadow creatures materialized inside the castle walls themselves, pouring out of darkened corridors. Rising from the shadows cast by torchlight, emerging from places that should have been safe. Impossible, Dominic breathed. They can't pass the wards. Unless someone let them in. Era finished. Their eyes met. Aldous, they said simultaneously. Chaos erupted instantly. Guards scrambled to defensive positions. Servants fled, screaming. Magic flared as battle mages engaged the creatures. Era's gift exploded to life, numbers burning across her vision. The throne room. She gasped. They're herding everyone toward the throne room. Dominic grabbed her hand. Come with me. Stay close. They ran through corridors filled with shadow and screaming, Era shouting warnings. Dominic cutting down any creature that came too close, but she could see the pattern now. The creatures weren't just attacking randomly. They were moving with purpose, with direction. Someone was controlling them, guiding them toward a specific goal. They burst into the throne room and found Aldous Merrick standing before the ancient throne. Surrounded by shadow creatures that moved around him like obedient pets, he smiled when he saw them. Right on time, he said pleasantly. I was beginning to wonder if my little diversion would work. Sound of stone grinding. Magical energy building. Step away from the throne, Dominic commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. Aldous laughed. Or what? You'll threaten me with consequences you can't enforce? You'll kill me with hands that exist outside fate? He gestured, and the shadow creatures moved, not attacking, but surrounding, cutting off retreat. You truly don't understand, do you? Aldous said, almost pityingly. What you sacrificed. What you became. I became a guardian, Dominic growled. I sealed the gate. I saved the world. You became a tool, Aldous corrected. Unchanging, eternal, perfect for maintaining the status quo. And I've spent 3 years ensuring you remained exactly that, isolated, focused on duty, never questioning what it all meant, until her, Aldous said, his gaze shifting to Era, the Omega who can see what shouldn't be seen, who gave you something you haven't had in 3 years, connection, purpose beyond mere existence. You're afraid, Era said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. You're afraid that if Dominic finds meaning again, he'll stop being the perfect weapon you've been wielding. Aldous's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Very perceptive. But it's more than that, little Omega. I don't just want to control him, I want to become him. He raised his hands, and the ritual marks on the floor beneath the throne began to glow. The ceremony that severed Dominic from time, Aldous continued, was unique, irreversible, or so everyone believed. But I've spent years studying it, dissecting every symbol, every invocation. And I discovered something fascinating. The glow intensified, spreading across the floor in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The power doesn't disappear, Aldous said. It can't. Energy cannot be destroyed, only transferred. And if one knows the right ritual, the right sacrifice, he smiled wider, you can steal it. Dominic moved instantly, but shadow creatures blocked his path. More poured from the walls, dozens of them, hundreds. The shadows obey me now, Aldous said. A gift from the entities beyond the sealed gate. You see, sealing the gate didn't destroy them, it merely trapped them. And they've been very, very patient, waiting for someone clever enough to offer them a new bargain. You reopened the gate, Era breathed. Just a crack, Aldous admitted. Enough to let the shadows through. Enough to make a deal. They give me power over their minions, and in return, he gestured to Dominic, I deliver them the one thing they've wanted for 3 years. The king who exists outside time. The anomaly that disrupts the natural order. Remove him, and the gate can be fully reopened. The demons can return. You'll destroy everything, Dominic said. I'll remake everything, Aldous corrected. With the power of timelessness, I'll be eternal, unkillable, a god among mortals. And unlike you, I won't waste it on noble sacrifice and empty duty. I'll use it to reshape the world as it should be. He stepped onto the glowing ritual circle. The ceremony requires 3 components, Aldous said. First, the willing surrender of one's fate, which I've already completed. Second, a connection to the timeless one, which I established through years of service. Standing close enough to leech fragments of your power. The runes flared brighter, and Era saw Dominic stumble slightly, as if something were being pulled from him. And third, Aldous finished, a sacrifice of equal value. A life given willingly, anchoring the transfer, his gaze fixed on Era. I had planned to use some nameless servant, he said. But you've made yourself so much more valuable. An Omega who sees death, who has bound herself to the timeless king. Your sacrifice will make the transfer absolute. No, Dominic snarled, fighting through the shadow creatures. But they kept coming, endless and relentless. Aldous raised his hand, an invisible force yanked her forward. She stumbled toward the ritual circle, unable to resist. Don't fight it, Aldous said gently. Your death will have meaning. You'll give birth to a new god. Era's mind raced. She could see the numbers above the shadow creatures all blank, all void. She could see Aldous's corrupted fate, fragmenting further with each passing second, and she could see something else. The ritual circle itself had numbers, not death dates, but something similar. Time constraints, limits. The ceremony had to be completed within a specific window, or the power would backfire catastrophically. Above Aldous's head, the corrupted numbers were counting down. 3 minutes. He didn't know. He thought he had all the time in the world, but the ritual was eating him alive from the inside, and he was too obsessed to notice. Era made her choice. She stopped fighting. Let herself be pulled into the circle. No. Dominic roared. She met his eyes across the chaos, and she smiled. Trust me, she mouthed. Then she turned to Aldous. If my death will complete the ritual, then let's complete it. But I have one condition. Aldous raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to negotiate. I am if you want this to work, Era replied. The ritual requires willing sacrifice. Force me, and it fails. You know this. His jaw tightened. What do you want? Let everyone else leave, Era said. Clear the castle. Give them time to evacuate. Then I'll give you what you need. Why would you care about them? Aldous asked. They've feared you, hated you, cast you out your entire life, because that's what makes me different from you, Era replied simply. I still care about people I'll never know, about futures I'll never see. Aldous studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well. The castle will be evacuated. You have 1 hour, 30 minutes, Era countered. Any longer and the ritual window closes. You die, and so does everyone here. Aldous's expression flickered surprise that she knew, anger that she'd seen it. 20 minutes, he said coldly. And if you're lying to me, I'm not, Era said. I never lie about death. Sound of running footsteps, distant shouting, bells ringing. Dominic wanted to argue, to fight, to tear apart the entire castle, rather than let Era sacrifice herself. But Era's eyes held his with desperate intensity, silently pleading with him to understand. She had a plan. He didn't know what it was, but he trusted her. Everyone out, he commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of his alpha authority. Full evacuation. Move. Guards scrambled to obey, herding servants and courtiers toward the exits. The shadow creatures parted to let them pass, Aldous keeping his word. For now, Dominic moved toward Era, but invisible force held him back. The ritual had already begun binding her. Don't do this, he said, his voice breaking. I have to, Era replied softly. You gave up everything to save the world. It's my turn. You don't owe the world anything. Maybe not, Era agreed, but I owe you. You saw me, really saw me. Gave me connection when I'd lived alone for so long. That's worth everything. Touching, Aldous said dryly. But enough sentiment. The clock is ticking. People fled through every door, every corridor. In the distance, alarm bells rang out, warning the city beyond the castle walls. 17 minutes remaining. Era watched them go, counting in her head. Servants with decades ahead of them, guards with families waiting, children who would grow old and have children of their own, all of them running because she had bought them time. When the last person had cleared the throne room, Aldous sealed the doors with magic. Dark energy crackled across every exit, locking them inside. Just us now, he said pleasantly. How cozy. 15 minutes. The ritual requires blood, Aldous said, drawing a ceremonial blade from his robes. The metal was black, etched with runes that seemed to absorb light. Quite a lot of it, actually. The sacrifice must be slow enough for the power to transfer completely. He stepped toward Era. Dominic roared, throwing himself against the invisible barrier. Shadow creatures held him back, dragging him down. Watch, Aldous commanded. I want you to see what your connection has cost her. He raised the blade. Era closed her eyes. 14 minutes. The blade pierced her palm sharp, burning pain. Blood welled immediately, dripping onto the ritual circle. The runes flared brilliant white, and something fundamental shifted in the air. Ara felt it, the tug of the ritual, reaching for her life force, preparing to drain her drop by drop. She had perhaps 10 minutes before the blood loss became critical, 5 more before it became fatal. 14 minutes until the ritual window closed, not enough time for both to happen. Aldous had made a mistake. He thought he was in control, thought he understood the magic he was wielding, but Era could see what he couldn't. The numbers above his head were fragmenting faster now, destabilizing with every second. The ritual continued. The corrupted power he'd stolen was incompatible with what he was trying to take from Dominic. Like mixing oil and water, matter and antimatter. And trying to become a god, Aldous was destroying himself. Era just had to survive long enough for the ritual to collapse. 12 minutes. You feel it already, don't you? Aldous said, watching her face. The power flowing out. Soon you'll be empty, and I'll be eternal. Era gritted her teeth against the pain, against the increasing weakness. You're dying, she said. Aldous laughed. Impossible. I'm becoming timeless. Look at yourself, Era insisted. Really look. Your own power is fighting what you're trying to steal. You can't hold both. You're fragmenting. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Aldous's face. He glanced down at his hands. The skin was starting to crack. Hairline fractures spreading across his flesh like broken porcelain. No, he breathed. No. I calculated everything. Every symbol, every invocation. You calculated wrong, Era said. Dominic gave up his fate willingly. It was surrender. But you're trying to take it. Force it. The magic knows the difference. 10 minutes. The cracks spread up. Aldous's arms across his chest. Beneath the fractures, something dark writhed, the corrupted power eating him from the inside. Stop the ritual, Era urged. Release me. Break the circle. You might still survive. Never. Aldous snarled. I've come too far. Sacrificed too much. I will have this power. He drove the blade deeper into Era's palm, into her wrist. More blood flowed. The ritual circle drank it eagerly, glowing brighter. But Era could see the truth. The ritual was consuming Aldous faster than it was draining her. 8 minutes until the window closed. 6 minutes until Aldous's corrupted power tore him apart completely. She just had to hold on. Sound of stone cracking, energy building. Dominic had never felt helpless before, even when he'd made the bargain to save the world. Even during the 3-day ritual that had carved away his fate, he had been in control, making the choice, accepting the cost. But now, watching Era bleed, watching her life drain into Aldous's mad ritual, he was utterly powerless. The shadow creatures held him fast. The barrier prevented him from reaching her, and his power, the timeless, unchanging nature that should have made him invincible, was useless. Because Era was mortal, fragile, his anchor, and he was about to lose her. Something in him broke. Not his body, not his power, something deeper. The careful control he'd maintained for 3 years, the emotional distance that let him function despite existing outside time. It shattered like glass. And beneath it was rage, pure, primal, absolute. The kind of rage that had once made him worthy of being Alpha King. The kind of rage that predated civilization, predated language, predated everything except the most fundamental truth of existence. No one touches what is mine. The shadow creatures holding him suddenly shrieked, because Dominic had stopped trying to fight them off. Instead, he had started to burn them. His power, the timeless energy that removed him from fate's flow, had always been passive, a state of being rather than a weapon. But Era had taught him something crucial. He wasn't as static as he'd believed, and if he could change, he could choose how to use what he'd become. Dominic let the timelessness flow outward instead of inward. It spread from his skin like invisible fire, and everything it touched simply stopped. Not frozen, not slowed, removed from time entirely. The shadow creatures touched by his power didn't scream or dissolve. They simply ceased to exist in any meaningful way, stuck in an eternal present moment, unable to move forward or back, effectively deleted from the flow of reality. Within seconds, the creatures holding him were gone, the invisible barrier shattered. Dominic stood, power radiating from him in waves that made the very air distort. Release her, he said, his voice resonating with something older than language. Now, Aldous looked up from the ritual, blood-covered and cracking. You can't stop this. The magic is already in motion. I'm not going to stop it, Dominic replied, stepping onto the ritual circle. The runes flared in warning. The magic recoiled, trying to push him away. He walked through it like it wasn't there. I'm going to finish it differently. Sound of magical energy intensifying, Heartbeats synchronizing. Era's vision was blurring. She'd lost too much blood. The ritual was draining her faster now, desperate to complete before its window closed. 5 minutes remaining. Then Dominic Continuan 24 was there, kneeling beside her, his hands covered hers whole and warm against her torn flesh. You can't be here, Era gasped. The ritual will take you too, I know, Dominic said calmly. That's the point. He looked at Aldous, who had frozen in shock. You wanted to steal my power, Dominic said, to become timeless. But you made a fundamental mistake. What mistake? Aldous demanded, though his voice wavered. You assumed the power was mine to lose, Dominic replied. But I gave it up 3 years ago. I don't own it anymore. I'm just inhabiting it, a guest in my own existence. He turned back to Era. The ritual needs a willing sacrifice to anchor the transfer, he said. But it doesn't specify who has to die. Only that someone must give themselves freely. Era's eyes widened. No, Dominic. No, I've existed outside time for 3 years, Dominic continued, his voice gentle. Every moment has been empty, meaningless, until you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to feel, to care, to be present. He brought her bloodied hand to his lips. If I lose you, he said softly, I go back to that emptiness, and I would rather cease to exist entirely than return to that particular hell. But the world needs you, Era protested weakly. You're the guardian, the eternal king. The world doesn't need a guardian who's hollow inside, Dominic replied. It needs people who care, who connect, who choose each other even when it's terrifying. He pressed his palm against the ritual circle, beside hers. His blood joined hers on the stone. The runes exploded with light. No, Aldous screamed, lunging forward. You're ruining everything. But it was too late. The ritual had what it needed, 2 willing participants, both connected to the timeless power, both offering themselves freely. The magic didn't care about Aldous anymore. It surged between Era and Dominic, forming a connection that blazed white hot. Era felt it, the pull of his power, the weight of his 3 years outside time, the crushing loneliness of eternal existence. And she felt something else, choice. The ritual was showing her what would happen if they completed it together. One path, they both died, the power dissipating harmlessly, Aldous's corrupted magic consuming him in retaliation. Another path, they both survived, but the connection between them would bind them permanently, their fates intertwining in ways that defied the natural order. A third path, barely visible, something new, something that had never existed before. The magic whispered to her, showing her possibilities. You see, death, he exists outside it. Together, you could rewrite the rules, Dominic, Era said, her voice barely audible over the roaring magic. I can see it. There's a way through. What do you see? He asked, his hand tightening around hers. A choice, Era replied. We can let the ritual take us both, die together, or we can choose something impossible, she said. Use the connection between us, between someone who sees all endings and someone who has none, to create balance. The light intensified until it was blinding. Aldous was screaming, his body fragmenting completely now, the corrupted power tearing him apart. 3 minutes until the ritual window closed. What do we have to do? Dominic asked. Accept each other completely, Era said. My mortality, your eternity, all of it, not as separate pieces, but as one whole. She met his eyes through the blazing light. It might kill us both, she admitted. Or it might bind us forever. I can't see which. Then we choose blindly, Dominic said, smiling, despite everything. Together, he leaned forward, his forehead touching hers. I choose you, he said. Whatever happens, I choose you, Era echoed, and they let the magic take them. Sound of reality bending, time fragmenting and reforming. The ritual erupted, not with destruction, but with creation. The power that had severed Dominic from time 3 years ago recognized what was happening, recognized the presence of someone who could see time's patterns, who understood endings in a way no one else could, and it offered a bargain, not the same bargain Aldous had tried to force, something new. You see, all endings, the power whispered to Era, but you cannot change them. You exist outside all endings, it said to Dominic, but you cannot experience them. Together, you are balance. The observer and the eternal. Do you accept this bond? Era felt the weight of it, the cost and the gift intertwined. If she accepted, she would be bound to Dominic forever. Their lives, their fates, their very existence would be woven together so tightly that neither could exist without the other. She would still see death, But now she would also carry a piece of Dominic's timelessness, giving her the strength to bear that weight without breaking. Dominic would still exist outside fate, but now he would carry a piece of Era's mortality, giving him context and meaning to anchor his eternal existence. They would be neither fully mortal nor fully timeless, something in between, something unprecedented. Yes, they said together. The magic surged through them, and the world shifted. In the throne room, Aldis's screams cut off abruptly. His fragmenting body collapsed into ash, consumed by the corrupted power he'd tried to wield. The shadow creatures dissolved like smoke in sunlight. The ritual circle went dark, and in the center of it all, Era and Dominic remained, alive, changed, bound. Ara looked at her hand. The cuts from Aldis's blade had healed completely, leaving only faint silver scars and patterns that matched the ritual marks on Dominic's chest. She looked at Dominic, and above his head, for the first time, she saw numbers. Not a death date, something else, a count that rose instead of fell. Time since he'd left the flow. Years outside of fate, and beneath it, barely visible, a second set of numbers that flickered and shifted. Potential days remaining if the bond breaks. He wasn't mortal, but he wasn't entirely deathless anymore either. His existence was conditional now, on her. Dominic was staring at his hands with wonder. I can feel it, he breathed. Time, not as something I exist outside of, but as something I'm adjacent to, connected to through you. He looked at her, and his eyes were wet. I can feel my heart beating, he said. And it matters. Each beat matters because you're here witnessing it. Era touched his face gently. I see your numbers now, she said. Not your death, but your existence. Every moment you've been outside time. Is that good or bad? He asked. I don't know, Era admitted. But it's ours. They stood together in the ruined throne room, surrounded by ash and fading magic, and for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. Sound of dawn breaking, distant birdsong, footsteps returning. The castle was silent in the aftermath. Servants and guards returned cautiously, stepping through corridors still heavy with residual magic. They found the throne room doors blown open, the ritual circle scorched into the stone, and Aldis Merrick reduced to nothing but ash and memories. And in the center of it all, the Alpha King and the Omega who saw death stood hand in hand, both marked by magic that no one fully understood. The court physician examined them for hours, searching for injuries, for curses, for any sign that the ritual had harmed them, physically. They're perfect, she reported to the assembled council, but magically, I've never seen anything like this. They're connected in ways that defy conventional understanding. Separate beings, but also somehow unified. Is it dangerous? One of the counselors asked nervously. I don't know, the physician admitted, but it's permanent. Whatever was done, it can't be undone. Dominic addressed the council formally that evening. Era standing beside him. Aldis Merrick attempted to steal the power that was given in service to this kingdom, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. He conspired with the demons beyond the sealed gate. He endangered everyone in this castle, and he failed, Dominic continued, because he fundamentally misunderstood what it means to sacrifice for others. He saw power as something to be taken, but true power comes from what we're willing to give. He looked at Era. This Omega gave her blood to buy time for evacuation. She offered her life to protect people who had shown her nothing but fear and rejection. That is true strength. He turned back to the council. From this day forward, Era is under the protection of the throne. Any who harm her, speak against her, or work against her, will answer to me personally. It wasn't a request. It was a decree. The council members shifted uncomfortably, but none dared protest. Era, however, spoke up. I don't need protection, she said firmly. I need purpose. Dominic raised an eyebrow. For 11 years, I lived in exile because my gift frightened people, Era continued. I could see death, but I couldn't prevent it. I carried knowledge that helped no one. She stepped forward, addressing the council directly. But yesterday, my gift saved lives. Not by telling people when they'd die, but by showing me how to prevent deaths that hadn't yet been written. By seeing patterns, possibilities. She met each counselor's eyes in turn. I want to stay at Thornhaven, she said. Not as a protected curiosity, but as someone useful. Let me use my gift to identify threats before they manifest, to read the futures of our enemies, to see dangers before they arrive. One counselor cleared his throat. You would serve as What exactly? An oracle, another counselor suggested. A seer, said a third. A weapon, muttered someone in the back. A partner. Dominic said quietly. Everyone fell silent. Era has proven herself invaluable, Dominic continued. Not just to me, but to everyone in this castle. She will serve as my advisor on matters of fate and future. And she will be accorded all the respect and authority that position demands. He looked at Era, and something unspoken passed between them. If she agrees, he added. Era smiled slightly. I agree. Sound of whispered conversations. Footsteps in corridors. Not everyone accepted the new arrangement gracefully. Lady Verena, one of the senior council members, cornered Era in the library 3 days later. You've bewitched him, she said. Without preamble, Era looked up from the text she'd been reading. I've done no such thing. Then explain how an Omega with no pack, no family, no standing has suddenly become the most powerful person in Thornhaven, aside from the king himself. I saved his life, Era replied simply. And he saved mine. We're bound by magic neither of us fully understands. But it wasn't manipulation. It was survival. So you say, Lady Verena said coldly. But the court sees what it sees. An outsider who arrived weeks ago now stands at the king's side. Who whispers in his ear? Who influences his decisions? I don't whisper, Era said. I speak plainly. And he listens because what I say makes sense, not because I have some magical influence over him. You're the one who sees death, Verena countered. How do we know you're not lying? Manipulating? Telling him whatever serves your purposes? Era closed her book carefully. You want proof that I'm not lying? She asked. Yes. Then ask me about your death, Era said. Verena paled. I don't. You have 43 years, 7 months, Era said calmly. You'll die peacefully in your sleep, surrounded by grandchildren you haven't met yet. Your heart will simply stop, painlessly, at the end of a long and full life. She met Verena's eyes. I could have lied, Era continued. Told you something frightening to cow you into submission. Or told you that you'd live forever to make you complacent. But I didn't, because I don't lie about death, ever. Verena stared at her, speechless. I understand your suspicion, Era said more gently. I'm an outsider. I'm different. I threaten the established order, but I'm not your enemy. I'm just someone trying to use a terrible gift to do some good. And the king? Verena asked quietly. What is he to you? Era smiled. The first person in 11 years who saw me as something other than a curse. That matters more than you can possibly imagine. Verena left without another word, but 2 days later, she stood beside Era when another council member tried to block Era from entering a strategic planning meeting. The king's advisor has every right to be here, Verena said firmly. It was an acceptance, but it was a start. Sound of old pages turning. Dust settling. Dominic found Era in the castle archives 2 weeks after the ritual, surrounded by books and scrolls so old they crumbled at the edges. What are you looking for? He asked. Answers, Era replied. About what we are, what we've become. She gestured to the text spread before her. The librarian mentioned that there are records of the first ritual, the one performed on you. I wanted to see if there was any precedent for this. She gestured between them. Dominic sat beside her. And nothing directly, Era admitted. But I found something else. She carefully unrolled an ancient scroll, the parchment so delicate it barely held together. This is a prophecy, she said, written by an oracle who lived 600 years ago. She was supposedly the last person with true foresight before her gift died out of the bloodlines. Dominic leaned closer, studying the faded text. What does it say? Era translated slowly, her finger tracing beneath archaic script. When death itself can see no end, and endings find no mortal friend. When time stands still, yet still moves on, and light persists, though hope is gone. 2 cursed souls shall intertwine, one bound to fate, one by design, the seer of ends, the endless one. Together they'll make 2 from none, balance broken shall be restored. Though neither death nor life afford the answer to what they've become, the first of many, yet still just one. Silence filled the archive. The first of many, Dominic repeated softly. What does that mean? I don't know, Era admitted. But the oracle who wrote this, she saw something. Something about us, or people like us. People like us? Dominic laughed without humor. Era, there are no people like us. I'm the only person to ever exist outside time. You're the only person in generations who can see death directly. We're aberrations, or we're exactly what we're supposed to be, Era countered. She stood, pacing among the dusty shelves. Think about it, she said. You removed yourself from time to seal the gate, but sealing it didn't destroy the demons, just trap them. What if the prophecy is saying that we're meant to be the balance? The thing that stands between the timeless demons and the mortal world? A bridge, Dominic said slowly. Exactly, Era replied. Neither fully mortal nor fully eternal. Connected to both sides. Maybe that's what the ritual created, not a mistake, but an answer to a question the world hasn't asked yet. Dominic stood and moved to the window. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and the first of many part. He asked. Era joined him at the window. I think it means we're not going to be the last. That others will come who are caught between worlds, between life and death, between time and timelessness. That sounds ominous, or hopeful, Era suggested. Maybe it means the world is changing, evolving, and we're just the beginning. They stood together in silence, watching the sunrise. I never asked, Dominic said quietly. Do you regret it? The binding? Era took his hand. Do you feel my heartbeat? Yes, and I feel your timelessness, she replied. Like standing in the eye of a storm, everything moves around us, but we're steady, connected. It's strange and frightening and, Dominic prompted. And it feels right, Era finished. Like all the loneliness, all the years of isolation, they were leading here, to this, to us. Dominic pulled her closer. I spent 3 years feeling nothing but emptiness. And then you walked into my throne room, and for the first time, I felt seen. I spent 11 years seeing everyone's death, but never being allowed to do anything about it, Era replied. And then I met someone whose death I couldn't see. Someone who exists outside the pattern. It was liberating. We're quite the pair, Dominic said, smiling. Cursed Omega and timeless King, Era agreed. What could possibly go wrong? They both laughed, real laughter, bright and genuine, and in that moment, the bond between them pulsed with warmth. Whatever they had become, whatever the prophecy meant, they would face it together. Sound of evening settling, fireplace crackling, 2 heartbeats synchronizing that night. Dominic invited Era to dine privately in his chambers. It had become their routine, evening meals shared away from the court's prying eyes, where they could speak freely about the impossible bond they carried. But tonight felt different. Candles flickered throughout the room, casting dancing shadows on stone walls. The table was set simply: bread, cheese, wine, fruit. Nothing ostentatious. Just food shared between equals. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. But Era could feel Dominic's gaze on her more frequently than usual. You're staring, she said, without looking up. I'm allowed to stare, Dominic replied. You're sitting in my private chambers, at your invitation, Era pointed out, which I gave because I can't seem to stop wanting your company, Dominic admitted. Era finally looked at him. Is that the bond talking, or you? I don't know anymore, Dominic said honestly. The line between what I feel because of the magic and what I feel because of you has become blurred. He set down his wine glass. But I do know this, he continued. Before the bond, before the ritual, before any of this, I wanted you close. I sought your presence. I felt less empty when you were near. That could still be the magic, Era said softly. The fact that I could see you when no one else could. Then let's test it, Dominic said. He stood and moved around the table, kneeling beside her chair. If I kiss you, he said. His voice, low and intense, and all I feel is the pull of magic. The binding of fate, then we'll know it's just the ritual. Just the power connecting us, Era's breath caught. And if you feel something else, then we'll know it's real, Dominic finished. He reached up slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Are you certain? He asked. No, Era admitted. But I want to know anyway. Dominic smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face from stern king to something younger, more hopeful. And then he kissed her, gentle at first. A question more than a demand. But the moment their lips met, the bond between them erupted, not with pain or force, but with rightness, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Like finding a song you'd been humming your entire life, suddenly sung with full orchestration. Era felt it, the rush of his 3 years existing outside time. The weight of his loneliness, the desperate hope that had kept him functional despite the emptiness, and Dominic felt her, the crushing burden of seeing everyone's death. The 11 years of isolation, the fierce determination to make her curse mean something, they pulled apart, both breathing hard. Well, Era whispered. That, Dominic said, was not just magic. He kissed her again, deeper this time. His hands tangled in her hair. Her fingers traced the ritual marks on his chest through his shirt. The bond between them sang with joy, with recognition, with something that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. When they finally broke apart again, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. I've existed for 3 years without truly feeling anything, he said. And now I can barely contain everything I feel when I'm near you. Is it overwhelming? Era asked. Terrifyingly so, Dominic admitted. But I don't want it to stop, Era smiled. Good, because I don't think we could stop it even if we tried. She could see the numbers above his head more clearly now, the count of his existence outside time. And below it, something new, a potential future. Days they might have together, if nothing broke their bond. The numbers were high. Impossibly high, centuries perhaps. I can see it, she said softly. How long we might have, if we stay connected. How long? Dominic asked. Long enough, Era replied. More than enough. And she kissed him again. Not caring about prophecies or counsels or the weight of impossible magic, for the first time in both their lives. They existed purely in the moment, and it was perfect. Sound of reality cracking. Ancient power manifesting 3 days later. They came. Era was in the garden at dawn, gathering herbs for the castle healers. When the air itself seemed to split open, the temperature dropped so suddenly that frost formed on the grass in seconds. The sky darkened despite the rising sun, and the birds, every bird in the garden, in the forest beyond, in the entire valley, fell absolutely silent. Era looked up. 3 figures stood before her. They weren't human. They weren't wolves. They weren't demons. They were older than all of those things. The first appeared as a woman wreathed in flowing silver mist, her eyes like distant stars. Power radiated from her in waves that made Era's gift scream in protest, because above this being's head, there were no numbers, no time, no fate, just infinite, terrifying absence. The second took the form of a man carved from living shadow, his features constantly shifting, never quite solid. When Era tried to look directly at him, her eyes slid away as if unable to focus on something that shouldn't exist. The third was the most unsettling, a child who appeared no more than 10 years old, but whose eyes held the weight of eons. They smiled at Era with too many teeth. You, the child said, their voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. You are the one who sees. Era's voice came out barely above a whisper. Who are you? We are the witnesses, the silver woman said. We watch the flow of time. We mark the moments where fate bends, where impossible things occur. The shadow man tilted his head. And you, little Omega, have done something very impossible. I don't understand, Era said, though she was beginning to. You and the one who exists outside time have bound yourselves together, the child explained, circling Era like a predator. Created a paradox. A being who is both mortal and eternal, both part of fate and exempt from it. We didn't mean to. Era started. Oh, but you did, the silver woman interrupted. Choice requires intent. You chose each other. You chose to merge mortal sight with timeless existence. And in doing so, you violated fundamental laws. Era's blood ran cold. What do you want? To determine if you should be allowed to continue existing, the shadow man said simply, before Era could respond. Dominic's presence exploded behind her. He must have felt her terror through their bond, felt the wrongness of these beings. He materialized between Era and the witnesses, power rolling off him in protective waves. Get away from her, he commanded. The child laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The timeless one, how delightful. We've been watching you for 3 years, you know, waiting to see if you would break, crumble, go mad from the isolation. You disappointed us by surviving, the silver woman added. But this, she gestured between Dominic and Era. This is far more interesting. We're not here to hurt you, the shadow man said. We're here to judge you. Dominic's eyes narrowed dangerously. By what right? By the right of those who maintain the balance, the child replied. Life and death, time and timelessness. These things exist in careful equilibrium, and you've disrupted that balance. We sealed a demonic gate, Dominic growled. We saved this world, and in doing so, created a new problem, the silver woman countered. You exist outside fate. She sees all of fate. Together, you could theoretically rewrite fate itself. Understanding crashed through Era. That's what you're afraid of, she said. You think we'll use our connection to change the natural order, to prevent deaths we shouldn't prevent, to extend lives beyond their time. Precisely, the child said, smiling their unsettling smile. But we won't, Era insisted. Won't you? The shadow man asked. When you watch someone you care about dying when the numbers above their head count down to 0, will you truly resist using your combined power to change that fate? Era opened her mouth to argue and stopped, because she didn't know if she saw Dominic's death somehow manifesting. If their bond broke, and he became mortal, and she saw his numbers counting down, would she be able to accept it? Or would she fight reality itself to save him? You hesitate, the silver woman observed, because you know the truth. Love makes liars of us all, makes us willing to break any rule, violate any law, destroy any balance just to keep what we treasure. Then what do you want? Dominic demanded. You've come to judge us, to determine if we should exist. What's the verdict? The three witnesses looked at each other. Some communication passed between them, wordless, instant, incomprehensible. We want to see if you understand the cost of what you've become, the child said finally. What cost? Era asked. The shadow man stepped forward. Every choice has ripples. Every action affects countless futures. And you, who can see those futures, who are bound to one outside of time, your choices will ripple farther than any mortals. You want responsibility, Dominic said. Is that it? We want proof that you won't abuse what you've become, the silver woman corrected. That you'll use your gifts wisely, carefully, with full understanding of the consequences. And if we can't prove that? Era asked. Then we sever your bond, the child said simply. Forcibly, violently, completely. You'll be returned to what you were, the timeless one, isolated and empty. The death seer, alone with her curse, forever separated. Era felt Dominic's hand find hers, their fingers interlacing. Give us your test, Dominic said. We'll prove ourselves. The witnesses smiled in unison, and it was the most terrifying thing Era had ever seen. Sound of reality warping. Visions manifesting. The garden dissolved around them. They stood instead in a space between spaces, a void filled with swirling images. Possible futures cascading like water over stone. The test is simple, the silver woman said. We show you a series of futures. You must choose which one becomes reality. But here's the complication, the shadow man added. Each choice will save some lives and doom others. Each decision will prevent some suffering and cause new pain. There are no perfect options, only impossible choices, the child finished. The first vision materialized before them, a village beset by plague, hundreds dying. But Era can see that in 3 weeks, a traveling healer will arrive with medicine that will save the survivors. If Era and Dominic intervene now, using their combined power to alter fate and stop the plague immediately, that healer will never make the journey and will therefore die in a bandit attack that would have been prevented by their absence from the road. 20 villagers saved now, 1 healer dead later. Or, let the plague run its course. The healer arrives, saves the remaining villagers, survives the journey. But 40 villagers die in the 3 weeks before the healer's arrival. Choose, the witnesses commanded. Era looked at the numbers. Above the villagers, days, hours. Above the healer, decades yet to live. We save the healer, she said quietly. Let the plague run its course. One life, with decades of future service to countless others, outweighs the immediate deaths. Cold mathematics, the silver woman observed. But acceptable. Next, the second vision appeared. A child born with a terrible gift, the ability to drain life force from everything they touch. They'll grow up isolated, feared, eventually going mad from loneliness. At age 16, they'll accidentally kill their entire family. At 17, they'll take their own life. But if the child dies now, in infancy, before their power manifests fully, a mercy killing all that suffering is prevented. The family lives. The child never experiences the torment of their curse. Or, let the child live. Teach them control. 3 families will die because of them before they master their power. But they'll eventually become a great healer, saving thousands. All that potential. All that good bought with a price of innocent deaths. Choose, the witnesses demanded. Dominic's hand tightened on Era's. She could feel his conflict through their bond. We let the child live, Dominic said firmly. We don't kill children for what they might become. We help them become better than their worst possibilities, even knowing people will die because of that choice. The shadow man pressed. Even then, Dominic confirmed. Interesting, the child murmured. Optimistic. Foolish, perhaps, but consistent. Final vision, the third future unfolded.
Dominic and Ara, 20 years from now, their bond has grown stronger, deeper. They've learned to use their combined powers to see and alter fate on a massive scale. They prevent wars, stop plagues before they start, save countless lives. But their intervention creates dependency. People stop making their own choices, stop fighting their own battles. They wait for the timeless king and his oracle to fix everything. Humanity grows weak, stagnant. And when Dominic and Era inevitably make a mistake, because even they aren't perfect, the consequences are catastrophic. Millions die in a disaster that wouldn't have occurred if people hadn't become so reliant on being saved. Or they limit their intervention. Let people fail. Let them struggle. Let them die when they would have died. Maintain the natural flow. Humanity remains strong, adaptive, self-sufficient. But Ara and Dominic watch countless preventable deaths occur, knowing they could have stopped them but choosing not to. The guilt slowly destroys them both. Choose, the witnesses said together. This was the real test, the impossible one. Ara looked at Dominic. He looked at her. Through their bond, they communicated without words. What do we do? I don't know. There's no good answer. Then we choose the truth. Ara turned to the witnesses. We can't choose, she said. Silence. Explain, the silver woman said coldly. Because both options are wrong, Ara continued. Both are built on the assumption that we should be making these choices at all, that we have the right to decide who lives and dies on such a massive scale. But you have the power, the shadow man pointed out. Having power doesn't mean we should use it, Dominic said. I learned that when I gave up my fate to seal the gate. I had the power to refuse, to let the world burn and save myself, but I chose sacrifice instead. We're not gods, Ara added. We're just two people who got caught up in something bigger than ourselves. And the right answer isn't to try to control everything or to refuse to help at all. Then what is it? The child asked. Balance, Ara and Dominic said together. We help when we can, Ara explained. When it's clear and direct and doesn't require us to play go. Continue. Janvier 24. Continue. Janvier 24. D with lives. We prevent disasters we can see coming. We warn people about threats. We give them knowledge and choice. But we don't rewrite fate wholesale, Dominic continued. We don't become the arbiters of who deserves to live or die. We remain witnesses and guardians, not rulers of destiny. We acknowledge that we'll make mistakes, Era said, that we'll sometimes save the wrong person or fail to prevent the right death, but we'll make those mistakes as mortals trying their best, not as gods who think they know better than the universe itself. The witnesses were silent for a long moment. Then the child began to laugh, genuine laughter this time, bright and clear. She sees it, the child said to the others. They both do. The silver woman smiled, and for the first time it didn't seem threatening. The point wasn't to make the perfect choice. It was to understand that perfect choices don't exist. You needed to prove you knew your limitations, the shadow man said, that you wouldn't fall into the trap of thinking yourselves infallible. The trap Aldous fell into, Dominic realized. Precisely, the silver woman confirmed. He thought power meant control, that having the ability meant having the right. You understand the difference. The void dissolved. They stood in the garden again, morning sunlight warm on their faces. The three witnesses remained, but they seemed less threatening now, more approving. You pass, the child said simply. Your bond will remain intact. But understand this, the silver woman added. We will be watching, always. If you abuse what you've become, if you start to believe yourselves above consequence, we will return. And next time, there will be no test, only severance. We understand, Era said. The shadow man stepped forward, and for just a moment, Ara saw something like kindness in his shifting features. You are the first, he said, but you will not be the last. Others will come. People caught between states bearing impossible combinations of power. You'll need to guide them, teach them what you've learned. The prophecy, Ara breathed, the first of many. Yes, the Silver Woman confirmed. You are pioneers, forging a path for those who will follow. Bear that responsibility well. The witnesses began to fade. One more thing, the child said, their voice already distant. The bond you share. It's more than magic, more than fate. It's choice sustained by continued choosing. Remember that. The ritual created the connection, but you maintain it through love. Love, Dominic said. Is that what this is? The child smiled one last time. What else would you call it? And then they were gone. Era and Dominic stood alone in the garden, the morning bird song gradually resuming. Well, Dominic said after a moment, that was terrifying, Ara finished. I was going to say enlightening, Dominic replied, but terrifying works too. Ara laughed, the sound slightly hysterical with released tension. We're being watched by ancient cosmic entities who can sever our bond if we step out of line. That's fantastic. Look on the bright side, Dominic said, pulling her close. We passed their test. They acknowledged we're doing something right. And we're the first of many, Ara added, meaning there will be others like us. We won't be alone in this. Others like us, Dominic mused. People bound between states, between life and death, time and timelessness, mortality and eternity. A new kind of existence, Ara said, neither fully one thing nor the other. Sounds lonely, Dominic observed. Not if we're together, Ara replied. He kissed the top of her head. No, not if we're together. Sound of crowd gathering, anticipation building. The word of the witness's appearance spread through the castle like wildfire. Servants had seen the sky darken. Guards had felt the temperature drop. The entire castle had experienced that moment when every bird fell silent. By midday, the court was in an uproar. Counselors demanded answers. Nobles whispered about curses and divine judgment. The common people gathered in the courtyard, afraid and uncertain. Dominic stood on the grand balcony overlooking the main courtyard, Ara beside him. Below, hundreds of faces looked up, fearful, curious, expectant. People of Thornhaven, Dominic's voice rang out, amplified by magic to carry to every corner of the gathering. You deserve the truth. Silence fell. 3 years ago, I made a bargain to seal the demonic gate, he continued. I gave up my fate, my future, my place in the natural flow of time. I became something outside the normal order of existence. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. And 3 weeks ago, this woman, he gestured to Ara, came to Thornhaven bearing her own curse, the ability to see death, to know when every living thing will meet its end. More whispers. When she looked at me, she saw nothing, Dominic said, because I have no death to see, no fate to read. And in that moment of recognition, of seeing and being seen, something fundamental changed. He took Ara's hand. We became bound, he said simply. Connected by magic neither of us fully understands. I am her anchor to the world of timelessness. She is my anchor to mortality. We are neither fully one thing nor the other, Era spoke up, her voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes upon her. We exist in between, and this morning we were judged by beings older than recorded history, the witnesses who maintain the balance of time and fate. Gasps from the crowd. They tested us, Dominic continued, to determine if we were worthy of continuing to exist as we are, if we understood the responsibility of what we'd become. And we passed, Ara finished. We proved that we will use our gifts carefully, that we understand our limitations, that we will serve as guardians and guides, not as gods. Dominic's expression grew serious. But I need you all to understand something, he said. What Era and I have become, this bond, this connection, It is permanent. It cannot be undone without destroying us both. We are bound for as long as we both shall exist." He paused, letting that sink in. "Which means," he continued, "that Ara is not simply my advisor or my oracle. She is my partner, my equal in all things. And I am formally declaring, before all of you, that she will stand beside me as co-ruler of Thornhaven." Shocked silence. Then chaos erupted. Some people cheered, those who remembered how Ara had saved lives during the shadow attack, who had benefited from her warnings. Others protested, nobles who saw their power threatened, traditionalists who couldn't accept an Omega with no pack standing equal to an Alpha King. Lady Verena stepped forward from the crowd of nobles. "Your Majesty," she said loudly, "with respect, an Omega cannot rule. It violates every tradition, every law of succession." "Then we change the laws," Dominic replied. "I am the Alpha King. I have that authority." "But the Council," another noble began. "The Council serves at my pleasure," Dominic interrupted, "and I am pleased to have Ara as my co-ruler. Those who cannot accept this are welcome to tender their resignations." Silence again, heavy with tension. Then a voice from the common crowd called out, "She saved my son. During the attack, she warned him and he lived because of her." Another voice, "She told me about my sister's illness, gave me time to say goodbye." More voices, building like a wave. "She's never lied to us. She uses her gift to help people. If the king trusts her, so do I." The support wasn't universal, but it was real, growing. Lady Verena watched the crowd, calculated the shifting dynamics, and did what she'd always done best, adapted to changing circumstances. She bowed deeply to Ara. "If the king and the people both accept you," she said clearly, "then who am I to object? I offer you my service, my lady." It wasn't love, it wasn't even trust, but it was acknowledgement, and that was enough to tip the balance. One by one, the other nobles bowed, some grudgingly, some with genuine respect. But they all bowed. Ara stood on the balcony beside Dominic, looking out at the sea of faces, some welcoming, some wary, all watching to see what she would do. She could see their numbers, all of them, decades of life stretching ahead for some, mere years for others. A tapestry of mortality spread before her, and for the first time, she didn't feel crushed by the weight of it, because she wasn't alone anymore. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "I know I'm an outsider. I know my gift frightens you, but I promise you this. I will use it to protect you, to warn you, to help you live the fullest lives your fates allow." "I can't prevent every death," she continued. "I can't rewrite fate itself, but I can help you prepare for what's coming. I can give you time to say goodbye. I can warn of dangers before they arrive. And I will never, ever lie to you about what I see." She looked at Dominic, and he smiled at her. That genuine, warm smile that transformed his entire face. "Together," Ara said, "we will guard this kingdom, not as gods or tyrants, but as servants of the people, as witnesses to your lives, as protectors of your futures." The cheering began slowly, then built to a roar. Not everyone joined in, but enough did that it didn't matter. Ara, the cursed Omega who had lived alone for 11 years, had found her place. And Dominic, the timeless king who had existed in emptiness for 3 years, had found his anchor. Together they would forge something new, something unprecedented, something the world desperately needed even if it didn't know it yet. Sound of evening falling, quiet settling over the castle. That night, after the declarations and the ceremonies and the endless stream of well-wishers and skeptics alike, Dominic and Ara finally found themselves alone. They stood on the private balcony off Dominic's chambers, their chambers now, she supposed, watching stars emerge in the deepening sky. "You realize what you've done," Ara said quietly, "naming me co-ruler. You've bound yourself to me politically as well as magically." "I know," Dominic replied. "The council will fight you on every decision now. The nobles will scheme. There will be those who try to drive us apart, to prove you made a mistake." "I know," Dominic said again. "And if our bond somehow breaks," Ara continued, "if the witnesses decide we've failed their standards, if something goes wrong with the magic—" Dominic turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Ara," he said softly, I know all of it. Every risk, every consequence, every possible disaster." "Then why?" she asked. "Why bind yourself to me so completely? You could have kept me as an advisor, as a companion, without making it official." "Because I'm tired of half measures," Dominic said. "I spent 3 years existing but not living, going through motions but not feeling anything real. And then you came, and for the first time in those 3 years, I wanted something." He cupped her face in his hands. "I wanted you beside me, not as a servant or an advisor or a secret kept in the shadows, but as my equal, my partner, my choice." "Even though I'm cursed," Era whispered. "You're not cursed," Dominic replied firmly. "You're gifted, burdened, yes, but also extraordinary. You see truth that others miss. You carry knowledge that could crush lesser people, and you choose every day to use that terrible gift to help rather than harm." "You make me sound noble," Era said. "You are noble," Dominic insisted. "More noble than most of the titled nobles in this castle. You gave your blood to buy time for people who had shown you nothing but fear. You offered your life to stop a madman. You faced cosmic entities with courage I rarely see in seasoned warriors." He smiled. "And you looked at me, at what I'd become, and you didn't flinch, didn't pity me, didn't treat me like a broken thing to be fixed. You just saw me, accepted me, stood beside me." "Of course I did," Era said. "You're the first person who ever saw me the same way." "Then we're equals in that too," Dominic replied. He leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. "I love you," he said simply. "Not because of the bond, not because of magic or fate or cosmic judgment, but because you're brilliant and brave and impossibly stubborn, because you make me want to be present in each moment instead of drifting through eternity, because when I'm with you, existence finally means something again." Ara's breath caught. She could see the numbers above his head, the count of his time outside fate, and below it, the potential future they might share. Centuries, maybe millennia, if their bond held. An eternity of moments stretching ahead. And for the first time, infinity didn't seem terrifying. It seemed like enough time to truly know someone. "I love you too," she said. "You're arrogant and stubborn, and you think you can solve everything through sheer force of will." Dominic laughed. "But you're also kind," Era continued, "and lonely in ways most people can't comprehend. And you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders without complaint. And when you smile at me, really smile, not that diplomatic mask you wear for the court, you look almost human." "Almost?" Dominic asked, amused. "Well, you did give up your mortality," Era pointed out. "Fair point." She reached up, running her fingers through his hair. "We're going to face so many challenges," she said. "Political opposition, magical complications, people who want to use us or destroy us, the witnesses watching our every move." "I know," Dominic said. "And we'll make mistakes. We'll fail sometimes. We'll hurt each other without meaning to." "I know. But we'll also have this," Ara finished. "This moment, this choice, this bond that's more than magic because we chose each other first." "Yes," Dominic agreed, and he kissed her. Not the tentative kiss from before, testing the connection. This was a declaration, a claiming, a promise made physical. The bond between them erupted with light, visible this time, silver and gold threads weaving around them like a cocoon. Every star in the sky seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeats. The very air sang with the rightness of it. And somewhere, in a space between spaces, Three ancient beings watched and smiled. The first had been tested. The first had passed. The first had chosen love over power, partnership over dominion, balance over control. And the path was open for others to follow. When Dominic and Ara finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the light gradually faded. But the bond remained, stronger than before, deeper than magic, unbreakable by anything except their own choice to sever it. "Well," Dominic said breathlessly, "that was cosmic," Ara finished, laughing. "I was going to say perfect," Dominic replied, "but cosmic works too." They stood together on the balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars. Two cursed souls who had found each other in impossible circumstances. The timeless king and the death seer, the first of many. But more importantly, simply two people who loved each other enough to face infinity together. And that, they both knew, was more powerful than any magic, more enduring than any fate, more real than any destiny written in the stars. It was choice, and choice, sustained by love, could move mountains, could change the world, could make even eternity feel like home. Sound of children playing, peaceful afternoon bird song. 10 years passed like a breath and like an eternity. Thornhaven had changed. The castle that had once been a fortress of stone and tradition had become something softer, warmer. Gardens bloomed where training yards had been. Libraries expanded into spaces that had held armories. The throne room had been redesigned, 2 thrones now equal in size and prominence. The kingdom had changed too. Under Dominic and Ara's joint rule, Thornhaven had become a haven for the gifted and the cursed alike. People with strange abilities no longer hid in fear or exile. They came to the castle, seeking guidance, seeking community. The prophecy had been right. Others had come. A boy who could speak to the dead, caught between life and the afterlife. A woman who existed in 2 places simultaneously, never fully present in either. And the man whose touch could heal or harm with equal ease, balanced precariously between creation and destruction. All of them, the ones caught between states, bearing impossible combinations of power, came to Thornhaven, and Ara and Dominic taught them how to balance, how to accept their gifts without letting those gifts consume them, how to use power responsibly, how to remain human even when they were more than human. The witnesses had appeared 3 more times over the years, never to test, only to observe, to ensure the balance was maintained. Each time they seemed slightly less threatening, slightly more approving. "You're doing well," the Silver Woman had said during their last visit. "Better than we expected." "Others are watching you," the Shadow Man had added, "learning from your example." "The path you're forging will echo through ages," the child had finished, "long after even your extended existence ends." Now, on a warm afternoon in late summer, Ara sat in the garden while Dominic met with emissaries from the Northern Territories. She was reading a journal written by one of the gifted who had come to them 2 years prior, documenting their journey of self-acceptance. A shadow fell across her page. She looked up, smiling, expecting Dominic. But it wasn't. It was a young woman, barely 20, her clothes dusty from travel. Above her head, Ara saw the familiar sight, decades of life yet to come. But there was something else. Around the woman's head, time itself seemed to shimmer. Not absent like Dominic's, not broken like Aldous' had been, but flowing in 2 directions simultaneously, forward and backward, past and future overlapping. "You're like them," the woman said breathlessly. "The stories are true. You and the king. You're bound between states." "Yes," Ara said gently. "What's your name?" "Celeste," the woman replied. "I can see time, not death like you, but time itself, the past and future of objects, places, moments, and I'm fragmenting, coming unstuck. I don't know how to make it stop." Ara stood, moving toward her. "You're the 7th," she said kindly. 7 have come to us in 10 years, all caught between impossible states, and we've helped all of them find their balance. Can you help me? Celeste asked, and there was desperate hope in her voice. Yes, Era said simply. We can. She took Celeste's hand and began leading her toward the castle. The first thing you need to understand, Ara said, is that you're not broken. You're not cursed. You're something new, something the world doesn't quite have words for yet. What am I? Celeste whispered. You're a bridge, Era replied, between states, between possibilities. The world is changing, Celeste, and people like you, like us, we're the evidence of that change. They walked through the garden gate, and Dominic emerged from the castle entrance. He took one look at Celeste, at the temporal shimmer around her, and understood immediately. Another one, he said softly. The 7th, Ara confirmed. Dominic smiled and approached, extending his hand to Celeste. Welcome to Thornhaven, he said. You're safe here. You're understood here, and we'll help you become what you're meant to be. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she managed. As they led her inside to prepare quarters and begin her training, Era felt Dominic's hand find hers. Through their bond, she felt his contentment, his purpose, his peace. 10 years ago, they had been 2 isolated souls, crushed under impossible burdens. Now they were teachers, guides, founders of something that would outlast them. Do you ever regret it? Ara asked quietly as they walked. Binding yourself to me? Dominic laughed, free and genuine and full of life. Never, he said. You gave me a reason to exist instead of just persisting. You made eternity feel like an adventure instead of a prison. We've barely begun, Era pointed out. We have centuries ahead of us if the bond holds. Then we'll fill those centuries with purpose, Dominic replied. With helping others, with teaching, with changing the world one impossible person at a time. Ara looked at the numbers above his head, still counting upward, marking his existence outside time. And below them, the potential future they might share. The number had grown, not centuries anymore, millennia, perhaps forever if they chose to sustain it. And looking at Dominic, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers, seeing the purpose in his eyes. Ara chose forever, as she would choose it again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day for as long as they both existed, because that's what the bond was, really. Not magic or fate or destiny, but choice, sustained by love, renewed every moment, forever. Sound of gentle music swelling, peaceful ending. Narrator. And so the story of the Omega who saw death continues. Not as a tale of endings, but of beginnings. Not as a tragedy of curses, but as a triumph of choice. Dominic and Ara would rule Thornhaven for centuries, becoming legends in their own time. Their castle would become a beacon for all those caught between states, all those bearing impossible gifts. The prophecy had been right. They were the first of many. But more importantly, they proved that even in a world governed by fate and death and time itself, love could forge its own path. That 2 cursed souls could find each other across impossible odds. That choice, sustained by devotion, was more powerful than any magic. Their story would be told for generations. But this is where we leave them, standing together in the garden, hand in hand, ready to face eternity. Not with fear, but with hope. Thank you for listening to The Omega Who Saw Death. Music fades to silence. Thank you for experiencing this complete audiobook. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what other fantasy romance tales you'd like to hear.